Hello and welcome to the Management Matters podcast by the University of Liverpool Management School. I'm Hazel Kennedy and today I'm delighted to introduce two guests who will be exploring workplace wellbeing. Clare Lawrence is Talent and Engagement Manager at HM3 Legal, where she's responsible for staff engagement and retention, supporting positive organisational culture and recruitment and onboarding of new staff. She's joined by Dr. Joanne Lyubovnikova, an Associate Professor of Organisational Behaviour and Director of Studies for two of our Master's programmes, Organisational and Occupational Psychology and Business Psychology and Strategic People Management. Jo is a researcher member of our Centre for Organisational and Employee Wellbeing, which looks at how to thrive and flourish, whether as organisations or employees.
Hi, so I'm Joanne Lyubovnikova. I'm an Associate Professor at the University of Liverpool Management School. I'm an occupational psychologist with a real interest in wellbeing, leadership, team working, and how essentially we can create better workplaces. And I'm here today with Clare. Clare, can I ask you to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, it's lovely to meet you. So my name's Clare Lawrence. I am the Talent and Engagement Manager for HM3 Legal, a law firm in the Northwest. My background is, over 18 years worth of recruitment and talent attraction experience. But the thing that really drives me is making sure that the reasons I'm telling someone it's a great place to work are valid. I don't think you can do my job unless you truly believe that it is a great place to work. So the other aspect to my role is really about making sure that we continue to ensure HM3 is a fantastic place to work, and all of the things that we do and the initiatives we have in place are there about not just attracting the best talent, but retaining it and making sure that we have a happy and healthy workforce.
Wow, really interesting. So we're here to talk about well-being. Could you tell me a little bit more about how well-being might be described or defined anecdotally at HM3?
Yeah, so I think well-being as a whole encompasses many, many different things. What it means to one person can be completely different to another. So I suppose you're probably well versed in this, but things like, your physical well-being, mental and emotional well-being, social well-being, a sense of belonging, right through to workplace wellbeing.
Absolutely.
Which encompasses so many different aspects.
And that's really interesting because that's exactly what the literature talks about when we're trying to pin down what wellbeing is. We don't really have a single definition because it means different things to different people.
Absolutely.
But those dimensions that you talked about very much reflect how we try and organise our thinking. So first and foremost, you'll think of psychological well-being. How am I feeling in general? What is my mood like? What's my emotional state? Then we can think about physical well-being, and that might matter more or less in certain jobs that are more or less physical. Even sedentary jobs have implications for physical well-being. We know sitting in front of a desk all day can be detrimental for many reasons. And then, as you mentioned, there's other types of well-being that are important, and they vary from job to job, to organisation. So things like social well-being. Am I working in a team? Do I have opportunity to develop meaningful relationships at work with my colleagues, with my boss? And again, depending on your personality, that might matter more or less to you in terms of what you want to get out from work. Yeah. And then we can think about professional well-being, like you said. Is my job giving me opportunity for development, for stretch, for growth? Professionally speaking, am I learning new skills? And so when we're thinking about well-being, it's almost like peeling back layers of an onion, and that different layers matter at different times. And interestingly, when you think about these things and how they intersect, you might be experiencing really positive well-being from a sort of professional perspective, but that might be at a cost to your psychological well-being. You might be feeling emotionally exhausted if you're working long hours and doing a great job, doing great things, but that's having a toll elsewhere. So I think it's important to see it in this complex, as a complex phenomenon that's got multiple aspects to it, and they sort of. Yeah. Do you see that play out with colleagues at work, with
Absolutely.
the initiatives that you're putting in place?
Going back to the start of my career in kind of the corporate world, I think as a graduate entering the workplace for the first time, a lot of my priorities were centered around financial well-being and finding a job that was going to pay well and had career development, and I could rise through the ranks, climb that corporate ladder. From a personal level, as my career has progressed and I've matured and my lifestyle has changed, I think I probably prioritise different aspects now. While financial well-being is important, so is the culture, the sense of belonging, the mental and physical health and well-being. But I don't know whether that is a culture shift and or whether that's a personal thing, but I certainly think now people prioritise overall well-being much more than, say, 20 years ago.
Yeah.
So I don't know, from your perspective, have you recognised and noticed changes in how organisations prioritise their well-being?
That's a really interesting question. And I think when we look at the organisational psychology literature, which is really about the psychology of work, there was that assumption some years ago now, if we go back sort of 50, 80 years, that what makes people happy at work is financial stability, being able to earn a good salary. And that's what motivated people at work and kept them happy at work. And many of our early motivation theories very much look at explanations around extrinsic reward. Let's pay people well, and then they'll be happy, and they'll find, find well-being at work.
But actually, is that environment detrimental to other aspects of your well-being and your health?
Absolutely, and I think that's what research has shown, that those short-term. So we know that when people get pay rises, they have a short-term sort of spike in job satisfaction, and then it very quickly returns back to pre-pay levels in terms of job attitude. So incentives for well-being have to be much more intrinsic than simply rewarding people, these sort of tokenistic gestures of giving like a bonus or, a day off, for doing well. We know that people are seeking much more intrinsic, meaningful aspects from their job. And I think that the point you interestingly said also about over your career span, that what means, what well-being means to you has also changed, is also an interesting point. So it probably is sort of a developmental effect as well. And we know in the literature, again, that people change over time, at the intrapersonal level. I'm going to change throughout my career, and what I'm looking for is going to change. And that might reflect personal circumstances, having a family, for example, having different priorities. And so what works, again, going back to wellbeing strategy, what works at one point in my life in an early career is not necessarily going to continue to have a positive effect as I go through my career.
I think naturally there's generational differences and different priorities as you go through your life journey. Do you think there's been a point in time where there has been a shift and you've seen organisations start to prioritise well-being more so?
Yeah, I think thinking about it, the pandemic, of course, we all went through that in one way or another, and the world of work has dramatically shifted. It was sort of a huge natural experiment for organisational psychology to try and understand what people want out of work. And I think a lot of us sort of really questioned, what do I want out of work? Now I've had chance to sort of work in a different way. Most of us were working remotely, for example. And even key workers who were still going to work, job demands changed radically. And I think nobody got through unscathed from a sort of a work well-being perspective.
It was a huge lifestyle shift entirely, wasn't it? Touching every
really
single aspect of your life.
Yeah.
So I think that point in time for me certainly was a point of reflection. I actually moved jobs in 2020, and when I was looking for my next role, the things that I were looking for probably were different to what I initially had set out to 10 years before or however long.
And what was it that you were looking for that was different from a well-being perspective, would you say?
I think doing the job that I do, it's really important that I believe where I work is a good place to work, and I can advocate it as being such. So for me, I wanted to make sure that I was working in a place that valued people as individuals and recognised that everybody has something to contribute, whatever level or of experience or stage in your life you're at.
Yeah.
And the culture and the values of that organisation were really important to me, and how they delivered it. It had to be meaningful.
Yeah.
I think going back 10 years ago, people saw benefits like pool tables in the office, darts board in the office, drinks trolley on a Friday. That's all well and good. But as you said, with pay rises, for example, that has an initial spike on workplace satisfaction and appreciation.
Yeah.
But actually, is that going to see you through?
Yeah.
So it's those long-term commitments to making it a good place to work that I felt were important to me. And I think now I see people looking for more meaningful strategies and initiatives.
Yeah. And I think meaningful work is the key here because, as you say, those short-term sort of interventions, and there's lots of evidence around these organisational level interventions. Let's give people, certain perks, as you were describing.
Tea and coffee in the office isn't a perk. That's just a basic right. Everybody should have tea and coffee in the office. But, if I see a job, and I still see them advertised now from various organisations, free tea and coffee, to me, that isn't something that would attract me to work for an organisation because it's not really about long-term commitment to positive workplace culture.
And that's true also of these, you see there's been a lot of hype around mindfulness and like meditation and giving employees the opportunity to sort of detach from work through these sort of exercises or days off, retreats, for example. And again, when we look at sort of review or meta-analyses, which are where they, we look at all the studies that have done similar things and look at overall trends, in general, there's very small, generally non-significant and short-lived effects of these sort of organisational level attempts to make everyone happy. And what really matters is exactly what you were just describing, that much more personalised approach where there's more of an authentic alignment between what your job looks like and what it means to you and what the organisation is trying to achieve. And that again links us to motivation, because I think when we're talking about well-being, we can't really separate that from motivation. Like, why do I want to go to work? Like, what is work? What's driving me to go to work every day?
What's your purpose?
Exactly. Yeah. And I think it goes back to meaningful work. And we know that jobs can be designed in a way to be more or less motivating based on certain psychological factors. So, for example, these are things like having variety in your work and having impact in your work. So having an impact on someone or something that's meaningful to you. Being able to get meaningful feedback from your work is crucial. If you don't know how well you're doing, you're sort of left unknowingly wondering whether you're doing a good job or not. That can be really detrimental for well-being. And also, crucially, having autonomy over your work. And I think this is what the pandemic uncovered, that when we give people more autonomy to work from home and manage their own time, they can find, that flexibility and personalize their work. And that gives a sense of control. And when controls exceed demands, demands that are being put on you, people generally, experience positive well-being. But when demands start to exceed that level of control or autonomy you've got, that's when things really start to go wrong. So going back to sort of your role and your experiences of implementing well-being policy and practice, can you reflect on what you think tends to work well in your experience?
I suppose there's two elements to look at here. From a talent attraction perspective, I think it's really important to make sure that the organisation is really treating people as individuals and giving the opportunity to be flexible. We live in a world where people have so many demands on them, whatever stage in life they're at. It could be the demands of a family, it could be financial demands, it could be caring responsibilities for elderly parents. Everybody has something going on in their life, and I think it's recognising that and therefore being flexible.
Yeah.
From a business perspective, though, there are real advantages of taking into account workplace wellbeing. So I read a report, I think it was a CIPD wellbeing report, and not only do we spend over a third of our lives in the workplace, and therefore it has a huge impact on us.
Absolutely, yeah.
We're also at a point in time where absenteeism is the highest it's been in over a decade.
Yeah.
And simultaneously, I think only 50% of organisations actually have a wellbeing strategy, but they're absolutely missing a trick, because I think there's so many benefits to actually considering it as a commercial strategy. Employee absenteeism costs a lot of money. Equally, if you've not got an engaged, happy workforce, it has an impact on productivity. So doing things to make sure that your team, your employees feel connected, engaged and bought into the business are really important in terms of business outcomes as well. Your talent attraction, your staff retention, everything is completely linked.
Absolutely. I think highlighting that strategic role is so important, because I think well-being at work has often been considered a nice to have. In the past, if we
It's
look
absolutely
back,
not a nice to have. This should be what you're doing,
Yeah.
not just morally. It's the right thing to
Yeah.
do. But from a business perspective, it's also got commercial benefits.
Absolutely. Yeah. If people are enjoying their work, if they feel connected to their work, if they find meaning in it, they're going to go above and beyond those sort of contractual obligations they have to do their job. That's where sort of innovation can happen, creativity can happen, and also those sort of meaningful relationships that you can have in the workplace, really sort of high quality relationships, whether that be with your teammates or your boss. We know that these things really matter and generate sort of much more positive effects than purely just productivity. It's a real strategic advantage, and I think you're absolutely right that it's interesting that CIPD report highlights even now that half organisations are missing a trick here. What would you think would be, for those organisations, what would be the first step in your experience of implementing a wellbeing strategy?
I think, first of all, it's recognising that there is no one size fits all. Everybody has different priorities that are personal to them. But it's listening to employees. Equally, what works for one organisation might not be right for another.
Absolutely.
So it's not best practice, it's what's best for us. And you can do that by employee listening, taking on board feedback. But if you're going to do that, you have to action it.
Yes.
And see it through and really commit to it. Become part of the culture, become part of your values, your everyday way of working. There's so many different strategies and initiatives and products and services that you can incorporate into a wellbeing strategy now. I suppose to reference a few. It's interesting that you say there was a cultural shift in 2020 during the pandemic. At HM3, we actually brought in a employee engagement platform in 2020 to really understand how our team are feeling. It gives us the functionality to take on board feedback. There's a quick 10-minute every week check-in where people can just put down how they're feeling, how their week's gone, what's gone well, what challenges they've faced. And the reason we brought that in is because of hybrid working, the move to working from home. We weren't perhaps seeing managers or colleagues as frequently. But equally, it's those water cooler moments. Or you're not necessarily going to take half an hour of your manager's time to debrief them on your week. But by doing that, it gives you a sense of still feeling connected and the opportunity for a manager to check in on you and see how you're feeling. And we still commit to that. This day. But we also use it for measuring employee sentiment, employee engagement, relevant surveys, fact finding, listening to what people have to say. And that's been really useful for us. So as a starting point, by embracing that technology and being a little bit innovative in our approach, it's allowed us to really understand what our employees want and the different nuances, and take that on board. We also have an employee engagement committee. So every team has a representative that can feed back between management and vice versa with ideas, suggestions. But they also work to make sure that we do have an engaged workforce. And ultimately, they're there to make sure we're a happy, healthy place to be. So they've brought in initiatives like Tech Timeout. The law sector is so well known for burnout. If you work in a top law firm, you can expect to work long hours and have really stretching targets. It's a very stressful environment, and it is a well-known industry for burnout, and we don't want to be like that. We want to work smarter, not harder, but also recognise that people have so many life pressures that they sometimes need to take time away from the desk. So we do things like a wellness walk once a month. We are fair weather walkers. If it's pouring down with rain, we take a rain check literally. But having that time away from your desk to get outside and benefit from being in the fresh air and connect with your colleagues for a chat.
Yeah.
We do something called Crafty Club, where once a month our employee engagement committee do crafts.
Oh,
and that's not everybody's cup of tea. You can come to it. You don't have to come to it, but the choice is yours. We've recently brought in a running club. We've got a book nook that's about to launch for avid readers, and they can just take time away from the desk to sit and read a book. And those moments of stepping away, I think, reinvigorate you as well. So we do really try hard with that.
I love that you've got so many different ways for people to get involved. You've really thought about what might appeal.
But they've all come from the employee
listening.
voice and from listening, and they're all things that have been well received and we've committed to and we regularly run.
And you've listened and implemented. And like you say, closing that loop is so important. And we know that just listening to people is fundamentally important. I always think about these experiments that they're pushing 100 years old now, called the Hawthorne experiments. And these psychologists wanted to see if productivity would be affected by the level of illumination in a factory. And this was in the US, in the Chicago Hawthorne electrical plant. And so they went in and did these experiments, adjusting lighting, with the assumption that a brighter space, a brighter factory will create more productivity. And what they actually found was that it didn't matter whether the factory was bright or dark, just the fact that they were there, their presence as researchers, signaled to these employees that they mattered and that they could be listened to and someone cared about them. And so this was coined the Hawthorne effect, simply by showing that you're listening. But I think you're absolutely right, following up and not just listening and getting the feedback, but then implementing something as a result of that is so crucial. And what also struck me about those examples was that exposure to nature you talked about. And a couple of years ago, I worked with a team of researchers looking at the physical office environment. We were sort of interested in, post-COVID, most people have had to at some point work on their cramped kitchen table, around pets and children and partners, not ideal from a physical office environment perspective. So what really makes a good office environment for well-being? And we looked at those different dimensions of well-being that we talked about, different types, physical, cognitive, social. And one of the key things that came out of that was that exposure to nature is really, it's intuitive, but it's really important. It makes a big difference. And allowing people even to have, a window in their office, because unfortunately some of us, even in this day and age don't have, we might not have optimal workspaces, but having that exposure to nature really makes a big difference. The aesthetics of your office matter, the ergonomics of your office space matter. And this varies from job to job, of course, but we should pay attention to these factors when thinking about wellbeing initiatives, and those sort of weekly walks that you were talking about. Taking a walk after a stressful meeting, it has really positive effects on being able to detach and reduce anxiety. So even if they're just short-term habits, there's something that at the individual level you can try and implement for yourself. And encourage as a leader, as a manager, to sort of role model that it's okay to take that tech time out, as you were discussing, or that's time away from the office, get a bit of fresh air. Absolutely. These things matter. But it's about getting permission in a way, isn't it? Yeah. If it's not cultural.
And these things can't be forced, culture can't be forced. Yeah. It's about collectively coming together and working towards the same goals. So another one of the things that we do is we commit to every month having a hub day where all of our teams from every office come together in our HQ. We have a business briefing so everybody feels informed about what's happening from the SMT around the business and upcoming things. We also commit to training, because that's another aspect of well-being,
absolutely,
that career satisfaction and development. So every month we'll combine these sessions with a training session to upskill either on a human skill level or professional level. But by doing that, we're all facing the same way. Every team member feels they've got a part to play. They feel well connected with their team. And I think, whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, we're all social beings to an extent.
Absolutely,
so that sense of collectiveness is really important. So last year we brought in a wellbeing benefits platform. And every month our team get credits to spend company funded on a wellbeing benefit of their choice. And what that looks like is different to everybody. Some people might go and buy a houseplant. Some people might buy supplements. I bought a National Trust membership because my children need to be outside running off their energy. So, I think it's recognising that everyone doesn't have the same priorities and the same preferences, and what works for one person might not work for another. We have, through that platform as well, access to virtual GP 24/7.
Oh, fantastic.
So it's trying to take into account all of those different aspects, join them together.
And I think it's, from a strategic perspective, it's signalling, isn't it, that as an organisation you care, and that you want to give people the autonomy to choose, like you say, that flexible benefit is something that they can determine for themselves. But nevertheless, the fact that it's available highlights the importance of their well-being. And I think it's that battle, we mentioned absenteeism earlier, but a real problem in organisations is also presenteeism. So coming to work when you're feeling ill. And I think organisations that don't signal the importance of well-being are at risk of creating those cultures where people don't feel that they can take that time out of work. Is that something that sort of you've had to do you see that correlation, like reduced presenteeism? People feel that they can call in sick and say, actually, I'm not well today, I need to take a day off.
It's interesting because I'm probably guilty of presenteeism. I come from quite a corporate background where you're expected to work long hours, and certain things you had to do before it was deemed okay for you to go home. And I'm still a little bit institutionalized, I suppose. So I feel I have to explain myself. But our managing director always says, just tell me what you're doing. Don't ask me for permission. Yeah. Tell me this is what you're doing, and that's fine. It's a culture of trust.
Yeah.
So if someone gives you flexibility, naturally you want to go above and beyond to repay that. And
to prove that you're still contributing.
And we're very lucky. We've got a team that are engaged. We've got one of the top IIC investors in customers and investors in people gold standard awards for any professional services firm in the UK. We're really proud of that because we actually believe if we have a happy workforce, then they're going to provide better service to our customers and clients, and it reflects that. So the team that we have, want to be in work. They want to do a good job. So as a result, we don't have a lot of absenteeism. I'm not saying it's perfect. We've absolutely still not got it right. We are on a journey, and all of the things that I've referenced have come in over time. We became a B Corp in 2024. So we are measured on our employee satisfaction and making sure that we take a sustainable, ethical approach. It didn't happen overnight. There's always things that we can improve on. And it's just every day trying to do and be better, look at ways to improve. Even some sort of small incremental change adds up to a bigger impact along that journey. We're always receptive to hearing about better ways of doing things. And I think that's the key, accepting that, strategy will evolve over time and being adaptable.
It's not a one-off intervention. And I think that's where a lot of sort of, in the past, where wellbeing has been more of a sort of nice to have, organisations have perhaps thought we'll do this one-off thing every now and again, once a year, and that, that's not sustainable. It has to be, as you say, strategic, embedded and evolving over time, and something that you're constantly paying attention to. And also something that operates at multiple levels. And we're talking there, we've talked about sort of organisational culture, we've talked about the individual and the personalisation of wellbeing, but I suppose there's that team element as well that you were just talking about in the middle, and having a really well-functioning team that's working interdependently, like everyone's working together, like you said, and is all contributing in a meaningful way. And again, we know from research that those types of teams have much better outcomes, both from a productivity perspective, and we've looked at this in healthcare. So those teams have higher levels of patient satisfaction. At the hospital level, well-structured team working, when we look across the organisation, predicts lower patient mortality, lower staff absenteeism. So we know that both at the local sort of group level and also the wider organisational level, when we structure teams well, when we have clear objectives for teams, they know what they're doing and they know how they should be working. And crucially, they come together, as you were saying then, talking to each other regularly about how they could improve how they're working. That, again, has a positive impact on both the team member as well as how the team functions, its innovation, its creativity. So a lot of well-being, the work around well-being, these ad hoc sort of interventions, they're almost like too late. If well-being is already, sort of at an all-time low, we've sort of missed the opportunity. Really good strategy around people management, around performance management, around job design, set the foundation for well-being. And these, what we call sort of secondary interventions, like where you're trying to fix poor well-being, they're only a short-term. They only have a short-term effect. You really have to get those foundations right. And then you won't have to worry about sort of intervening later on, because hopefully well-being will sort itself out through getting those fundamentals right.
We've been on a real journey. I think the pandemic in 2020 was a real point for us to reflect as a business. We actually completely rebranded and we wanted to make sure that one of our straplines, were doing law differently, but equally making sure that all of our team understood what that journey looked like for us and what that rebrand looked like, becoming a B Corp, so that everybody knew what the plan was, where we wanted to get to, and could play a part in that journey. And I think that communication has been really important in getting everyone to kind of drive forward to the same goals.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think, leadership, communication, role modelling, these things are so important for really setting that strategic view of well-being at the organisational level. It's been so interesting, Claire, to hear all about these different ideas, policies, practices that you're enacting, and it sounds like a great place to work.
I hope it is. And everyone's priorities on well-being is going to evolve over the next few years again, I'm sure. So it's keeping on moving and keeping on doing that listening. But it's been fascinating to hear your evidence-based research as well and how it ties in. So thank you for your insight.
No, thanks so much. And it'd be really interesting when it's in 5 years from now to sit down and have this conversation again, particularly with all the shifts in the world of work around AI and, flexible working. So it'd be great to, if we could look into the future to see what it might look like. Thanks so much for your time, Claire. It's been great chatting to you.
That was the Management Matters podcast by the University of Liverpool Management School. Thanks again to our guests Clare Lawrence and Dr. Joanne Lyubovnikova. Details about our Centre for Organisational and Employee Wellbeing can be found on the Management School's webpages at www.liverpool.ac.uk/management. Thanks for listening.